So I'll talk, I got a bunch of slides, and then maybe Terry can come back up and we get quite a few questions on that stuff, so maybe you can help me. It's a good segue, because you talked about the watershed, BMPs, and that's going to come up in this talk. I'm here to talk today about the ALUM Addition program at Canyon Lake, how it came about, what it involves year to year, the effectiveness of the program, the costs, and then a little note on Lake Elsinore as well. And today I have good news, which is really nice. Sometimes these things are so complex and it just seems daunting. But in this case, we have an actual, I think, a winner. And so, without further ado, we'll jump right in. The history of the program. So back in 2011, C.M. Smith got involved working with Riverside County for control in this watershed cities, as well as RACAC, the agricultural community, on building TMDL implementation plans. And so these plans are nutrient plans for the watershed to reduce nutrient loads to the downstream lakes to meet the allowable loads set in the TMDL. And in that process, we're building upon work that was done in the mid-2000s, looking at the idea that you can actually reduce the water quality, or improve the water quality through in-lake controls, right? So we wanted to incorporate a hybrid of both watershed controls and in-lake controls with these nutrient management implementation plans. And at that time, two different controls were looked at. HOS, which is the hydrolytic oxygenation system. You heard Terry talk about the one that failed. I didn't realize that was going to be a nice setup. But, and the idea also of using ALUM or some other chemical addition to reduce the phosphorus within the lake. And there was pros and cons to each one, and we went through this process and decided in the end that an ALUM program would be something you can jump right into, as opposed to having the capital upfront cost of the HOS system. And then you could always come back down the road and build a HOS if need be. And so part of the ALUM program is, is the aluminum that comes with the ALUM going to be toxic to the fish? And so there was an entire toxicity study done by my ex-boss's company GI, it's here, Richard on our hub, and they found safe dosing levels for Canyon Lake to make sure that the fish would be safe. And then we were awarded a grant to jumpstart the program back in the 2018 period. So you'll see a lot of graphs coming up that really kind of look at before ALUM and after ALUM. And what we find out is 2013, September was the first application. This is a little bit of a review of what Terry was talking about, but essentially the ALUM is spread across the top of the lake. It settles through the water column, forms a plaque, strips the phosphorus out of the water, and then continues to work within the lake bottom. Less phosphorus, you get less algae, you get a healthier lake, and there's success apparent after 9 years worth of implementation. One thing, a lot of times you'll see an ALUM application that's a single application, and that's where you put a larger dose in, and you're really trying to focus on the bottom, the internal load. This program that we have in Canyon Lake is different. It's a routine, ongoing program, and so we're doing lower doses, but more frequently every year. So that's what makes it a little bit different. So here we have the seasonal applications. Every year we do an application at the end of the wet season, and the reason there is during the rainy season we get a lot of watershed loads of nutrients coming into the lake. That loads up the lake with the higher nutrient concentration. As soon as the sun starts getting heated up, you see this February, March algae bloom. And historical data shows that, so the idea is to intervene prior to that bloom. The second application happens in the fall. And so over the course of the dry season, we have a stratified lake. There's an internal load of phosphorus coming into the water column, but it's being held back in the deeper waters because we don't have a mixed lake at that point in time. As the air and the water get cooler in the fall, there's a turnover. And when that turnover happens, we see a release of this bottom water into the full water column, and it can spawn a new algae bloom, and we've seen that in historical data. So the idea is to add the alum prior to the turnover to prevent it from getting into the surface where there's light to feed the algae. And so we had these dosages that, we had models back in the original TMDL implementation that suggested these dosages would bring enough phosphorus reduction. And so what we do is we simply, on every 6 months or so, I talk to Terry and Safra and the task force, and we coordinate, we look at the lake levels, and we say what amount of alum we need to order for the delivery. And so here's just some pictures of what it would be at the maximum if we had a full lake. And so each year we take a look, it's a little bit lower, it's like it's not at full levels, but this is the amount of gallons of slurry that are being dropped off the lakeshore and then spread out. So here's a picture. So I said we've been doing this for 9 years, right? And so if it's twice per year for 9 years, we're looking at 17, I think it's 17 applications. And so you'll see 17 different combinations of a before alum and after alum concentration of phosphorus in the lake. And you can see every single time we see a reduction. We have the red is before, and then the blue is after. And this is not even looking at it immediately before, immediately after. It's, a month before whenever work goes out and does their routine sampling, we always time it accordingly. But still, there's, periods of time where other rain can come in, other things can happen. And yet we still see this improvement on a consistent basis. Another line of evidence that says that the ALUM program is working. When you look at the ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus, those are the two major nutrients that algae need to grow. The perfectly balanced diet would be 7 milligrams of nitrogen for 1 milligram of phosphorus. And then you get, both nutrients could be controlling the growth. If you're under 7, that would mean you have plenty of phosphorus and your nitrogen is controlling the growth. And historically, actually, despite what folks think about freshwaters, Canyon Lake was somewhat nitrogen limited, which is interesting because the phosphorus in this watershed is thought to be naturally high. And so that would kind of be another line of evidence. So one of the things we're trying to say with regard to the TMDL revision, that phosphorus is naturally high and the same is in the watershed. But that's another story. So we take a look at all the data Wood collects over many years. Before 2013, very low nitrogen phosphorus ratios. After 2013, a substantial shift in the ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus. So we see that phosphorus is now the controlling nutrient by far, and that any reduction in phosphorus will translate to a reduction in algae in the lake. More good news. Here's some more pictures of, well, what about the algae in the lake? How has it changed? And so here's just some food graphs. The right is from the Woods Monitoring Report from 2021, and they're very nice to include all of the data going back to 2001. So you can see concentrations of algae, every single sample collected. You have East Basin in the red, so we know we often see higher concentrations in the East Basin. And then blue is the main body of the lake. And you can see since 2013, the conditions have come down quite a bit from a period where it was quite hot, especially when we were first getting involved with the CNRP development in the 2010, 11, 12 time frame. When you look on the left, the TMDL numeric target is an annual average chlorophyll lake concentration. And so it's 25 micrograms per liter. And when you take an annual average over the past, I guess, since the program, we got all the way back to 2011, you can see that that has been coming down. slowly. And in fact, over the past 3 years, it's been now below the target. So this is part of our compliance demonstration in December of 2020. Provided a demonstration, and in a lot of ways we're meeting both the numeric target as well as the load allocation. And I believe that's what we're going to talk about next. Oh no, one more slide on cost effectiveness. So, Terry, you mentioned this. The cost effectiveness of the ALUM program is stark. So if you had to treat the same amount of nutrients with watershed controls, you were probably looking at about 10 to 50 times the price per pound of phosphorus removed. And maybe those don't always work so well. And so the ALUM program allows us to know we're getting rid of the phosphorus in the lake, and it also allows the water to go downstream, which is really important for this lake. Yeah, this one always jumps out at me. So it's a great deal to be able to use this program, and it's really critical to be able to continue to use this program. This is a slide that says basically, sometimes when you look at each 17 years and those blue lines and the red bar and the blue bar, right, you'll see that the reduction is kind of muted in the years where phosphorus is extremely low at the beginning. So you're basically adding alum on top of a pretty clean lake. And so the idea that you can remove a lot is not really, there's not a lot of opportunity to remove a lot. And so going through it year to year, the idea that you can skip the spring application, and we've done that one in 10 times, so, depending on conditions at the end of the wet season. And so we put this together for the task force to help that decision process. And every year it's like a process. It depends on how much rain comes, depends on what the turbidity in the lake is looking like, depends on whether we've been a lot of warm weather and the wet season. But we can go through this process to make a decision. In fact, we just did. We went through this process. We almost did not apply ALUM next week, but then we decided to apply ALUM. So, we probably got it back this going forward next year around this time. So the amount of phosphorus that is removed by the ALUM from a mass standpoint is really important for the watershed cities and all the dischargers, the ag community to understand so that they can appropriately take credit for the reduction. And so what we've done is jar tests back in 2012, at the very start of the test. Part of the jar test is to look at, the toxicity of fish, but the other part is to look at how much phosphorus is being removed for the amount of alum that's being added to in the lab experiment. And then we compare those to the literature values and see if it's within the range that you might expect. And so what we've come up with, and it's a conservative number, is that for every 150 kilograms of alum that we apply, we're removing 1 kilogram of phosphorus. I've seen numbers as low as 6 or 10, and so as ALUM, so 6 or 10 as aluminum, which would be like 15 for alum. And so this number is very conservative. We're probably need more. So when we take that number and we apply it to the amounts that we have Terry spread across the lake, we can compute the phosphorus removed at each application. You see 17 or 19, I guess it's 17 applications so far. In the dark, you'll see the fall applications and how much is removed from those. And in the light colored blue, you see the spring. We use a slightly higher dose in the fall because we have a lot more concern with regards to that internal load and stripping that out at the end of the dry season. So the next slide, what we do is we take those 2 applications per year and sum them up to an annual. So the annual reduction of phosphorus that's achieved is the sum of the fall and spring, obviously. And that varies year to year based on water levels or how we're sort of ordering the amounts, but not drastically. And that's part of the benefit of this program. We can budget for it year to year by having kind of a somewhat consistent amount of alum applying. And the removal that translates to about 2,000 kilograms per year of phosphorus. And that is offsetting all of the excess nutrient loads that are coming into Canyon Lake from the watershed, as we've documented in our 2020 compliance report. It was uncanny how close it was. And like you guys on the South remember, we said you're on the razor's edge. But it's just, we had, Garth from Alta is here, goes out, collects data coming into the lake, like year after year after year. We had just a massive amount of stormwater data coming into the lake. We compute the mass and then compare it to what's allowed, and it's about 2,000 kilograms more than is allowed. And so we can claim that we're compliant from the standpoint of the waste load allocation as well as into the amount target. So good news. And then there's even more good news. So ALUM is applied to Canyon Lake only when there's no overflow of lake Elsinore. That was very clear. The task force did not want to waste ALUM applied to Canyon Lake and then have it march to Lake Elsinore, and then where there's higher pH, it wouldn't work as well. It wasn't a good strategy for Lake Elsinore. But at the same time, you have to think about the fact that you're improving the phosphorus levels in Canyon Lake significantly. So when you have a storm, that's going to cause a spill. It mixes with the water that's in Canyon Lake, and then that's what's spilling. So by improving the phosphorus levels in Canyon Lake, we're actually improving what's spilling over to Lake Elsinore. And there's the good news, where when you look at before ALUM, the overflows from Lake Elsinore, the picture, you also see the dam and the overflow, used to be 0.57 milligrams per liter of phosphorus on average, and now it's down to 0.22. So it's more than 50% reduction in the transfer load from 90% of the watershed that is upstream of Canyon Lake. So for Lake Elsinore, there's an improvement. And that's basically what I got. The routine low-dose alum additions are working to what we say is meet the compliance. The alum in Canyon Lake has also had notable benefits to Lake Elsinore. And then the final point here is, a little bit of my soapbox, but alum additions are used to offset the watershed loads within the lake. So we allow the water to get downstream, where we can then treat it more confidently, but we're also taking advantage of that stormwater by, it's a supply, right? So we're having more water supply for the city areas that we need to use at their water treatment plant. And then we're actually increasing the amount of fresh water, which is what John was talking about, how important fresh water is to Lake Elsinore. We're getting more fresh water still over the by not holding back the stormwater in the watershed. And so that is my final conclusion. Do you want to go up there if you have any questions?
So I think Tara mentioned that pH effects have been effectiveness in all applications. Have you seen changes in pH in the lake from the 20 years of our applications?
In Canyon Lake, I'm not I haven't looked at that lately.
It seems like when we come twice a year, it seems like it's always worked. They tell us that, so it's been pretty constant the years we've been coming. There's 2 data points per year.
Yep.
One of the things that over the years, we have a lot of problems because of the construction and the levee has increased from home and so on and so forth. A little over 10 years ago, we had a Pyramid project. Thank Bill Williams because we were on the labor board started. And we took out about a third on the east bank. one of the problems is what do you do with the material because the nitrogen content is so high that you can't put it any place because it kills the trees or whatever you're trying to plant. So we had to treat dredging material in order to get rid of it. The other big problem, when we first started, we had copper sulfate. You replaced that with the ALUM. Copper sulfate was worse than what was happening tonight. But it amazed me because we took a survey and the amount of soil we took out, approximately a third of the east bed, is completely filled up today. Coming down from the construction of the homes and so on in Medford. We have a hard time keeping up because when you lower the water, it creates a problem with the algae. And we're going to have to dredge sometime in the near future. But my question is, what do we do with all the nitrogen-loaded material that you're developing by putting the ALUM in and dropping everything to the bottom of the lake?
That's a good question. And I know the capacity of the lake is significantly reduced since the dam was built, but even in recent years. And so, dredging just from the standpoint of capacity is probably something that's out there in the future. And then what to do with the material. I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
We've done some operational dredging projects, and that's usually what limits you. It's not so much, there's a little bit of a cost to what's going on with the material, but 9 times out of 10 you can't put it anywhere, right? So hydraulic dredging is basically the most effective way to go. So you have to build a settling pond somewhere, you have to pump the dredge spoils there, you have to return the water, and then you have to get rid of them. A place like Canyon Lake, there's no place to throw the pond for the dredge spoils, right? So that gets to be a problem. So but your question was more about the phosphorus that's accumulated in the sediments?
Well, yeah, like I say, we're definitely going to have to dredge in the future. Either that or East Bay will be completely useless. And one of the things that when I talked with the we have a committee that's working on that. And one of the things we thought would be a rickrock, the stream coming in and pumping the nitrogen-loaded material on the north side of the location, which at the present time is used for just a park or something like that. We're not worried about what's actually being developed. It's where do you put the material? And by rickrocking that stream, it created a huge area that we could pump it into. You're not involved with hauling, which is a tremendous expense. Plus, even hauling, where you're going to haul it to. But this way, all you're doing is putting the stack where it came from. That's our approach to it, and we'll continue to do that. But what I'm wondering is, is there any other treatment as the depth of the water gets less and less?
I don't know what to say. I guess one of the things I just quickly say is there's been a couple of papers, a couple of meetings I've been recently where people are starting to calculate that the world's going to run out of phosphorus in maybe 50 years. Phosphorus is required to grow crops, right? And that's why it's a minor material. We're looking at the reserves around the country. So I think more and more research and people are going to have to start looking at how do you, instead of just capturing this phosphorus and get it out of the lake, how do you bring it back and do something else with it? There are companies that are starting to use some of these filtered bags you put in a stream that catch the phosphorus and bonds as you go by, and then you can take those out and use them as a crop or a soil amendment. You're going to see more and more of that in the future, just because phosphorus is going to get more expensive and more scarce.
Well, it's going to take a lot of negotiating with 3 or 4 different people. We're very fortunate to have an excellent relationship. I think, the Army Corps of Engineers and Elsinore. I've worked with Phil for years. We came over in 1812 with this. But it was, anyway, we hope to find a solution because it is going to be a major problem.
Good dialogue. Any other questions?
Thank you so much,